Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome and thank you for being here. The Parade of Veterans is going to begin shortly. A few trips ago we started the Flags for Heroes program. It's a really neat, it's a National Honor Flight Network program, and it's for deceased veterans that did not get to go on this trip or maybe did not make it back home. And it's a way for families to represent their loved ones. These banners will go with us the entire trip, and there will be pictures taken where the family chooses, and then at the end the family gets back the banners and a picture at that memorial site. So it's a pretty neat program, and so we'll start off with Flags for Heroes.
Our first flag this morning is Frank Haddon, who served in the Korean War, and George Walls, who served in World War II. Our next flag this morning is Orrin Wendell, who served in the Korean Vietnam War. Our last flag this morning is Thomas Gilligan, who served in the Vietnam War. Our first veteran taking the trip this morning is Norman Truelove, who served in the Army as an E-4 specialist during Desert Storm and SHIELD. His student guardian escort is Dayton Wilson, Hartford sophomore. Our next veteran is Joe Reed, who served in the Air Force as a staff sergeant in Desert Storm. His student guardian escort is Garrett Hammond, Olby Jr. Our next veteran this morning is Todd Lagasse, who served in the Air Force as an E5 during Desert Storm. His student guardian escort is Carly Geiger, Olby sophomore. Our next veteran is David Thiel, served in the Army National. Sorry. Okay, our next veteran is Robert Mesa, who served in the Marine Corps as a corporal in the Vietnam War. His student guardian escort is Riley Scott, Olby Sr. Our next veteran is Perry Shepard, who served in the Army as a Spec 4 during the Vietnam War. His student guardian escort is Peyton Crisp, Olby Jr. Our next veteran is Dwayne Martz, who served in the Army as a Sergeant 1 class, first class, with conflicts in Grenada, Panama, Honduras, and Mogadishu, Somalia. His student guardian escort is Ella Wilson, Olby sophomore. Our next veteran is Doug Wagner, who served in the Army Reserve as an E6 staff sergeant during Desert Storm. His student guardian escort is Alyssa Ziegler, Olby Jr. Our next veteran is Ed Main, who served in the Marines as a private during the Vietnam era. His student guardian escort is Lucas Shepard, Olby Jr. Yeah. Our next veteran is David Thiel, who served in the Army National Unit as a sergeant during the Iraq era. His student guardian escort is Millie Bailey, Olby Sr. Our next veteran is Gary Edwards, who served in the Army as an E4 specialist in the Vietnam War. His student guardian escort is Lily Skowski, Olby sophomore. Our next veteran this morning is Dotson Bradbury, who served in the Army as a Spec 5 in the Vietnam War. His student guardian escort is Gracie Sheevy, Olby Sr. Our next veteran is Larry Drummond, who served in the Army as a sergeant during the Vietnam War. His student guardian escort is Kayla Stanky, OP sophomore. Our next veteran is Tim Stone, who served in the Army as a Spec 4 during the Vietnam era. His student guardian escort is Hannah Cole, OP Junior. Our next veteran is Mike Graves, who served in the Navy as an ETR-3-E4 during the Vietnam era. His student guardian escort is Bridget Judd, OP Junior. Our next veteran is Clayton Robertson, who served in the Air Force as a Master Sergeant E7 during the Vietnam era and Desert Storm. His student guardian escort is Trinity Wendell, Hartford Junior. Our next veteran is Mike Powell, who served in the Marine Corps as an E4 in the post-Vietnam era. His student guardian escort is Lexi Giesken-Mears, Hartford Junior. Our next veteran is Dave Barrett, who served in the Navy as an E3 during the Vietnam War. His student guardian escort is Ava Tyson, OP sophomore. Our next veteran is Don Ehrlich, who served in the Navy as a third-class petty officer in the Vietnam War. His student guardian escort is Kinsey Curzon, OP Senior. Our next veteran is Ken Wood, who served in the Navy as a second-class petty officer during the Vietnam War. His student guardian escort is Cameron Tiemeyer, OP sophomore. Our next veteran is Bob Brown, who served in the Army as a Sergeant E5 during the Vietnam War era. His student guardian escort is Hadley Garrett, OP Junior. Our next veteran is Seth Mathis, who served in the Army as an E4 specialist during the Vietnam War in Korea. His student guardian escort is Katie Robert, OP Senior. Our next veteran is Don Hoffman, who served in the Air Force as a Staff Sergeant E5 during the Vietnam era, Chillin. His student guardian escort is Grace Coughlin, OP Senior. Our next veteran is Gilbert Steffen, who served in the Army as a Specialist 4 during the Vietnam War. His student guardian escort is Faith Deadman, OP Senior. Our next veteran is Arlen Schuler, who served in the Navy as a Seaman Apprentice during the Korean War. His student guardian escort is Aubrey Garrett, OP Senior. Our medical staff, veteran Dr. Bryce Heitman, veteran Robbie Hayes, and Christina Magana. And thank you everybody for joining us this very early morning. We greatly appreciate your support, and you guys can follow their trip on Facebook. It really is a neat thing to follow to see all the things that they get to do.